Hi, hello, and welcome to Stuart Asbell from All Corners Farm. Hi, Stuart.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. You're joining us here at the 12:30 hour on WNHH 103.5 FM's, doing our part, doing the radiothon for the Great Give. And Stuart, you're with All Corners Farm, and that's an organization that I hope you'll tell us about. And as you're talking and people want to make a contribution, what's the best way they can do it? Is it your website or do they go to thegreatgive.org?
Best thing to do is to go to the greatgive.org website. Our actual home website is currently under construction for the new season, so it's not up and functioning yet. But definitely through the Great Give. And if people want to find out more about us, we have a page on Facebook. You can just look up All Corners Farm and find us there.
So I've been in New Haven covering stories for the New Haven Independent for many years. And, we've learned something about even greater New Haven. I don't know where All Corners Farm is. So tell us the basics. Where are you located? When did you get started? How many are you? And what's the great pressing need that you'd like people to respond to over this next conversation we're going to have?
So we're located in Cheshire, and we're in our second year. We incorporated as a nonprofit in January of 2018. Our first growing season was last year, and so we're in our second season now. And our purpose is relatively simple. We grow organically, non-GMO produce, and we donate it to local food pantries and soup kitchens to help balance the diets of their clients. Pantries are notorious for having a lot of non-perishable items, canned foods, instant foods, things that by nature have a lot of preservatives, but fresh organic produce is something of a premium. So when we reached out to the organizations that we serve, fresh produce was a thing that they really, really desired. And so that's really simply it. We don't have an actual home-based location. What we are doing currently is we're a very new nonprofit. We are growing on different sites. So we have a site at Paws Pet Resort and Spa, it's a local business in Cheshire. They graciously donated a 500 square foot area where we plant. We also have a large plot at Boulder Knoll Community Farm in Cheshire, where I also happen to be the manager, and we grow there. And we also have a large garlic patch at North 40 Farm in North Branford. All of these spaces were donated to us for our use, and it allows us to generate a great deal of produce. In our first year, we donated over 700 pounds of food, plus coordinated donations from other nonprofit groups that were growing. And it ended up being around 1,500 pounds of fresh produce that we donated over the course of 3 or 4 months. And that was starting late. We were still building our infrastructure last year, so we didn't get a spring crop in. We basically started planting in mid-June, early July. So this year, with our stuff in place, we're able to get an earlier start in spite of second winter and mud season, which is passing for April these days.
Right, and a winter storm allegedly on the way.
Fantastic.
Which is not good for young vegetables, I gather.
No, it's not.
So, Stuart, what was the two questions from what you said? One, who are the recipients of the produce? Are they pantries in the immediate area of the farms? And then the larger question: what made you get started to do this? That need's been around for a long time, but why did you leap into it just in the last year or so?
So, first to answer your question, whom we serve currently, the 3 organizations that we are mainly serving are the Cheshire Community Food Pantry, which has around 245 families that are served there. The Southington Pantry, just a little ways away, and the Greater Waterbury Interfaith Ministry Soup Kitchen in Waterbury. We have, obviously designs to serve further out as we expand our operations. That's our goal. But at this point, when we're small, we wanted to deal with organizations that are very local and be able to provide substantial amounts of food to a fewer organizations rather than spreading ourselves thin. And but if there is, say, a surplus of tomatoes at one pantry, the soup kitchen will always take whatever we have in surplus of that, so we can balance it out and kind of do our thing that way. As far as how we got started, I learned how to start growing food when I was about 3 years old. My father taught me all these things, and we had seedlings in our basement. We had a little family garden in our house, and so I've been growing since I was knee high, essentially. But I worked as an early childhood educator for about 20 years, and through all that time, there was always a gardening program of some kind, either one that was established or one that I had started, because it's a garden is a great outdoor classroom, and you can not only teach kids about nature and life cycle of plants, but you can teach them all kinds of things: their colors, their counting, and science, and I'll mention. So it's always been a great resource. And as this progressed and I dealt with different sites over time, we wanted to create a component of community support. So where we're growing food, let's see if we can donate some of it to people who are in need and kind of bring them into the notion of supporting those who are less fortunate in the community. And and the last place that I had done this was Adath Israel Synagogue in suburban Philadelphia. And we had about 800 square feet, and we generated about 1,000 pounds of produce in a season from essentially April to November. And we thought, wow, that's a lot of food in a very small space, and we have places to donate it. And we thought, why not do this on a larger scale? Why not, instead of simply getting seconds or surplus food that farmers can't sell, let's try and provide organic produce that is store quality produce. One of the things that we firmly believe in is that, people may be down on their luck, they may have unfortunate circumstances, but they should be allowed to eat with dignity, not just taking handouts, but getting something that's like quality produce that's healthy. And, because just because of circumstances doesn't mean people shouldn't be entitled to eat well and eat quality food. And obviously the component of having food that's not grown with pesticides then helps create greater health outcomes for people who are already in a situation where they may not be getting the best nutritional value out of the food that they're getting. So, and I know that as a movement in Connecticut, pantries and soup kitchens are trying to up the level of nutritional value of the meals that they're serving and the food they're providing. So we're able to step in and help them out to meet that goal.
So I'm talking to Stuart Asbell with All Corners Farm in Cheshire, and you could donate to his organization by going to thegreatgive.org and just looking it up under the agriculture, whatever the rubric there is, but you'll find it. Stuart, who does the actual growing? How many? When you say we, how many are you? And did you carry on that? I would imagine that members of the congregation in Philadelphia helped you do the work in the garden. Who's doing the work at your three sites?
Primarily, it's myself.
Oh.
So, and occasionally we have volunteers that help out, but it's primarily myself. And one of the cornerstones of what we do is we're trying to convey an idea of individual sustainability. So while we're small and we don't, we're not funding staff and we don't have a huge pool of volunteers yet, it's a very limited number of volunteers, keeping it manageable so we can show people this is what one person can do.
Oh.
If you know what you're doing and with very simple equipment, this is what you can manage. which is part of the educational component of it. We believe in producing food locally, sustainably. We believe in small food chains as opposed to global international food chains, which then lowers the amount of pesticides that are being used, lowers the amount of fossil fuels that are being used, and helps people fulfill the needs in their community without generating a lot of waste. So we waste an incredible amount of food just in produce alone. So keeping things in a local focus and what one person can manage or a family can manage is something that we try to convey in everything that we do. And as we expand and we're able to serve a larger community and we can bring in more volunteers, obviously we'll do as much as we can. But we're also very fortunate at Boulder Knoll. We have a number of nonprofit and religious organizations, the YMCA, St. Peter's Church, Boulder Knoll, the Friends of Boulder Knoll itself, who also donate. So I help them coordinate their donations there, and everybody's kind of pitching in and working together and supporting each other there. And it's a really wonderful project that's happening there in Cheshire, and I'm really honored to be a part of that as well. So
Boulder Knoll is the nonprofit, or is that a for-profit organization?
It's a nonprofit. It's the organization is Friends of Boulder Knoll, right. And they operate this Boulder Knoll community farm, and so they provide for a fee plots to families so they can grow their own produce. And I'm there as an educational resource and, you know, as a support person if they need any help or they need advice or what have you. So
but that's sort of a day job for you, and All Corners Farm is your kind of your own dream nonprofit that you've begun. Is that
exactly? That's exactly it.
How unusual is the provision of organically grown produce to the to soup kitchens and food pantries? Is that because it is much more labor intensive and much more thought has to go into how you do it?
Sure, and there's also like increased cost. So
right,
it's, you know, people who are growing at home, by and large, they're growing organically. They're not dumping a lot of pesticides on their food.
Right.
They're eating it. They know where it's coming from. Right. But, you know, surpluses from supermarkets and things of that nature, the majority of the produce that's sold is not organic. So proportionally, the amount of food that gets donated, if, you know, a shipment is not up to snuff or they have too much of something or whatever, it tends to not be organic produce. So when you talk about it being more labor intensive, ironically, I find in our small operation, if you do it right, it's not as labor intensive.
Explain that, if you would. What's right?
So right means what I do is a lot of what's called companion planting. So the earth abounds with a lot of different plants and herbs and whatnot that, say, drive away pests, attract beneficial insects, improve the growth rates of other plants. So using that methodology, we can keep insect predators away. We can attract insects that feed on other insects, you know, taking advantage of how nature works to reduce the amount of actual labor that we have to do in terms of insect control, fertilizers, that sort of thing. The less inputs that we have to do artificially, whether it's an organic product or not, I mean, everything we use is organic, but the less you have to put in, the more in balance you are, the more close to as nature intended you're operating, which means you have healthier soil, it means you have healthier food, it means you have a healthier environment. You're not having runoff of things into your groundwater, which then ends up in the oceans and creates these dead zones off the coast. It's all very interrelated. So instead of, you know, large, giant corporate farms, when you keep things small, you have more control over that. And that sort of like how we consider the future of food production seems to be the direction that we would like to go in.
I can tell you're a born educator. Did you leave the early childhood education behind? Do you imagine at some point bringing classes of kids out to some of the plots as demonstration plots, and to kind of bring together the different strains of your work?
Absolutely. In fact, last summer, I did a little program at the YMCA's camp in Cheshire. Went
Mm.
out there the day and I brought them a bag of tomatoes. They were eating cherry tomatoes out of the bag, and we were talking about the plants and what we do. And yeah, eventually, when we have an established home site, and even at Boulder Knoll, we try to do educational programming there, bringing the kids in. And one of our goals for the coming year, 2 years, is creating a kids program so that they can have a garden at home, maybe a raised bed or a garden box or something like that,
Mm.
and teach them these basic fundamentals, and they'll get a kit and they'll be able to put it together and work with their parents and kind of take advantage of this time where families are rebonding and rebuilding, being at home, taking advantage of that and creating a home growing situation
Right.
there. So absolutely, that is one of our goals. So
So if you want to make all of that uh, dream become more closer to reality, you can do it by supporting All Corners Farm. You go to thegreatgive.org and you look that up, and you can hear this. You are hearing this on WNHH 103.5 FM, the Great Give Radiothon. Stuart, you're still there, I take it.
I am indeed.
I noticed a couple of things. I went to, I guess, the Facebook page, and some of the things that are growing on those plots, I wrote down crops that I did. Maybe you can explain. Somebody is growing Carota carrots, and
Yes.
growing French breakfast radishes.
Yes.
What are those? They sound delicious and mysterious. What are they? And are you doing interesting exotic stuff?
It sounds exotic, but it's really not. The breakfast radishes, traditionally supermarkets, you get those little round radishes.
Oh, right.
And
But they're red, right?
they're red. Sometimes they're white. This radish happens to be more of a cylinder shape, and it's got a red bottom and a white top.
Oh, the French radish.
Yeah.
Right, because French people like very thin slices of radish on toast, I think, right?
I've never been to France. I'm not,
All right.
so I don't know their culinary proclivities vis-a-vis radishes. But it's what works for it is that it's very mild in its flavor. Radishes can sometimes tend to be bitter. When I was a kid, hated radishes. My mother couldn't get me to eat radishes just to save my life. I could not eat them. But this is a very mild radish. So even my kids at the preschool would eat their radishes, and they produce well, and they're a little bit something different. So we throw those in. The Carota carrots, I believe their origination is Japan. It's a Japanese carrot, and it does very well in all types of soils. Mm-hmm. So if you have like a rocky, hard soil, carrots tend to prefer a sandier, softer soil so they can develop a nice root. This is a carrot that was developed to kind of power through all that.
Whoa! I think
it got very dramatic about the carrots.
Yeah. No, it could be this. It could be the sounds of the carrots and the radishes growing. Now we just have a few minutes left. I think that was music from our next presenters, but all these interesting tales of Carota carrots and French breakfast radishes are being brought to you by Stu Asbell, who is with All Corners Farm up in Cheshire. You go to thegreatgive.org and you can help keep this dream moving along to its next step. By way of closing, you're the perfect person for me to ask this question to. You were an early child educator. You used the gardening to teach all kinds of stuff, as well as the pleasures of gardening, as you said in the beginning. I don't see anywhere in apart from the kind of stuff that teachers do on their own and through programs that come in specifically in the schools, like the many schools here in New Haven have gardens
Hmm.
that have been planted when the schools collaborate with New Haven Farms or with other gardening groups, which is quite wonderful. But in the formal curriculum of the New Haven schools, I don't think any schools these days, there's almost nothing about gardening and agriculture. And I say this as I was a kid in California many years ago, and in the 7th grade in Los Angeles, we were required to take one semester of drafting, where you had to do blueprints, and one semester of agriculture.
Hmm.
And we actually had, behind the bungalow where the classroom was, each of us had 2 rows. And I mentioned the French breakfast radishes because I grew 2 rows of radishes. And that was one of the best educational experiences of my life. Wonderful
Yeah.
radishes. And I don't know how scientific, how much we got out of the experience in terms of knowledge, but the idea of putting something in the ground and seeing it and making it happen has stuck with me. And, I'm a very modest little gardener as a result of that. So
It's it's something that people say to me, "Oh, I can't grow anything. I turn everything I touch dies," and I think people sell themselves short.
yes.
I think they sell themselves short. There are certainly methods that you could use to improve what you're doing and to have things turn out better. But I think that if people are brave and they give it a shot, they'd be surprised at what they're able to do.
So Stuart, in the minute or so we have left, what's the if contributions come your way through the Radiothon and throughout the Great Give here on WNHH 103.5 FM, well, would the contributions go towards equipment? What's anything particularly pressing?
Right now, a lot of this does go for equipment, containers for distributing food. Our most pressing need right now is we are actually hoping to take the funds that we raise and invest it in what's called a wheel hoe. There's a company out in California that makes these gardening tools. That's essentially, it's a wheel that you attach implements to, and it's the perfect kind of thing for working in the size spaces that we work in, for land cultivation, for weeding, and it's a labor-saving device. It's hand generated, so it doesn't use fossil fuels, and the amount of time that and labor that we'll save being able to use this device will allow us to spend more time planting, get more production out of the land, and we'll obviously then be able to we'll be able to concentrate our efforts into food production and food distribution, which is our primary goal.
How much does a wheel hoe cost?
So for this whole rig, it is around $500,
Ah,
which is not a lot of money, and will probably pay for itself in a season in terms of labor costs. Right now, we're using, uh, simple hoes and shovels and rakes and hand cultivators and things of that nature, which does the job, but it's a lot more time consuming. Last year we had a broad fork donated by an organization out in California, and a broad fork is basically a gigantic steel fork that you use to break up the soil instead of a rototiller. So it preserves the microbes that in the top layers of the soil instead of shoveling them under and destroying your tilth that a mechanical rototiller would. So yeah, it's a really great device with a lot of different applications, and would save us a lot of time, not to mention be easier on my back. So
all right. So to help All Corners Farm and to keep the founder Stuart Asbell's back in working order. $500. I feel like I'm an auctioneer towards a wheel hoe for All Corners Farm. Stuart Asbell, thank you so much for being with us on thegreatgive.org, and go to thegreatgive.org and support All Corners Farm. Thank you again, and stay in touch with us.
Absolutely will. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, Alan.
Okay.